So the good news is that finally we were able to get what I wanted since 2018, which was one concise spreadsheet listing not only the account number, which is just a gibberish of 15 numbers, but actually the unit number and what it is. And all of my tenants have been brought current. I have great tenants. They just have to be aware what they have to pay. But I would like a discussion about the fees and why it went the way it went without a proper conversation from even Attorney Langhammer or anyone, but just to give me a say. Like I feel like I was branded as this argumentative person where really all I wanted was to stop getting inundated with papers and emails that made no sense to me because they just had account numbers on them. So Kristen and I have really worked hard, and now it's one concise Excel spreadsheet with a listing of all the account numbers, and my tenants are getting their bills by email. So I'm super, super happy. But how we got to this point and reimbursement of some of the attorney fees and some of the penalties, and there were $60 late charges that I was told by Chris LaRose or Chris Riley, and Kirsten said that the higher up said they would not reimburse me, which I really, really feel is unfair because I have not been uncooperative. I just didn't know these bills existed.
This is Stu Peel. I'm one of the commissioners. I'm glad that we finally got you in a good position where you're happy with, with the billing, as I understand it from what you said. And I guess what I would say is that we have a policy, and NPU worked what sounds like they spent quite a bit of time coming up with a special policy just for yourself. And, we're willing to do that for a large customer if that's what will make you happy. But you have to understand that the policy that they created for you is different from every other customer that we have.
Well, it wasn't necessarily to make me happy. It was to make me understand my bill and what is my bill and what is not my bill. So, so I don't know that you have many customers that have a unique scenario like mine where you have not only, there's the parking lot lights, some apartments have their own water, then there's some buildings that have common water for 10 units. Then there's some people who moved out and I gave them back their security deposit, but they had a water balance and I didn't know about it. So it was just a hodgepodge that all I really wanted was just an understanding. Because when you're one woman running 400 apartments with one cell phone and you get 66 emails and pages of things mailed 2 and 3 times with just account numbers on them, it wasn't the right thing to do. It really wasn't. And I incurred thousands of dollars of attorney fees that should have been put toward bettering this in 2019 or 2020, not midway into 21. It's not that I didn't want to pay it. It's a lot of the building numbers were wrong. A lot of the meter numbers were wrong. A lot of the account, even today, Kristen had to fix something because it wasn't correct. And I like things done correct, and I like to understand. So even, with Assessor Ralston, we were on the phone, we built, back in the day in 2019, they would say you have a high water bill for building 4. So I would hire my plumber at $100 an hour, give notice, take my time, go into 10 apartments, check for leaking toilets. I'm in the wrong building. So, that would frustrate you as well. I don't know who's on the call, but does anyone want to comment? Chris? Hello?
I think we're having some technical
Yeah,
difficulties.
I'm not sure. I can still hear you. I'm not sure if anybody, we're having, yeah, it sounded like when we got on the phone tonight that there was quite a scramble to get some technical issues sorted out.
And I see our IT person there moving around, so I think it's just a I don't think they're ignoring you. It's
Right.
just a
Okay.
technical difficulty, so we'll
Okay.
stand by.
Yeah.
Okay.
So give us a minute. So not to get into a long discussion, but we typically don't, as Chairman Staley stated at the beginning of the meeting, we typically don't do a back and forth at the public session. We just want to let you know that we heard you, and NPU was working very hard to get your situation sorted out and get you back on an even keel. And that's what we ask of NPU, and it sounds like they were successful. So
They were successful. It has been a long time coming since 2019, and I'm happy to contribute my time.
Excuse me, folks. Could I have you just hold on for a moment? We're having some technical difficulties in the building. If I could have you just stand by. I'm trying to get the microphone in the room unmuted, okay?
okay,
Hold on, please, for just a minute.
all right.
Can you hear us now?
I can hear you.
There you go. Thank you very much. Sorry for that difficulty. Thank you, John. No problem. I couldn't hear over the background.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Mike Goldblatt, Commissioner Goldblatt. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
You can?
I hear you,
okay?
Mike.
All right. Hey, this is my thoughts on it, and I'm coming in from an outsider's viewpoint to a certain degree here. I understand that penalties are, very annoying, and I spent a lot of time working with clients to help them get relief from some penalties, so I'm a little bit sympathetic by my nature. I think that, usually both parties bear some responsibility when there's a problem, usually. But speaking for myself, I mean, if things went well for 6 months and everything's being paid on a timely basis, I would have no problem if the other commissioners would consider waiving some of the penalties. Because, if you're showing good faith and you're adapting the system, and we did work hard to come up with it for you, we are trying. I would go that other yard for you if it was just up to me. If you're paying everything on time, there's no problems going forward. I know that's not 100% solution for you. You still have legal fees and whatnot, but, we didn't get any of that money.
Well, with all due respect, I'm not sure that we should be negotiating this during the public comment period. First of all, this is an administrative matter, and secondly, we can discuss this in executive session, but I don't think we ought to negotiate it like this. Certainly, individual commissioners shouldn't be.
I'm not negotiating. I'm just stating my feelings about it. That's not negotiating.
I respect that, and I appreciate the willingness to have the conversation, because last board meeting, I did not feel that, so that was very much appreciated.
All right, well, thank you very much for your comments. We have other people waiting to participate in the public comment period, so.
Thank you.
Stacey, we can
I'll
move on to the
discuss.
next.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Any others wanting to make public comment? I had the impression there was more than one, but.
There are. Well, they could be watching and not necessarily wanting to make
That's
comments.
true. Well, I'll ask again, is there anyone out there who wishes to speak and make public comments to the Board of Commissioners?
May have been one. Steve, everyone's unmuted, right? Is that affirmative from John? Okay, all right. Right. Is that a chat from our participants, Steve?
I cannot get more than your phones.
At Henry?
Yeah, also comes in.
Okay, yeah, so for executive session.
All right, well, unfortunately, I don't know if our audio system is working like we would hope, but I'm going to assume that there's no one else out there wishing to make public comments tonight. If you wish to do so, please, at some point, please write us or show up at the next meeting. We're interested in what you have to say, but it doesn't seem to be moving along at this point, if there is, in fact, anyone even out there. With that in mind, we will move to the next item, which is approval of the minutes of March 23rd, 2021.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from March 23rd, 2021.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Stuart. It's unanimous. The minutes are adopted. The next item for the agenda is board resignation. As I think you're all aware, Commissioner Becker has had to resign. He was a wonderful commissioner, I think. He really started the transition of this Board of Commissioners. He was appointed to replace Jim Sullivan, who was the chairman of the board and resigned, opening up a seat for Steve Becker. And I think that he started a trend, and I think we've had a terrific board since then. I'm going to miss him tremendously. I think we all will. And Steve, I know you're on. Well, thank you very much for your service.
Well, thank you very much, Bob, and the other commissioners. I just want to say it's really been a distinct pleasure for me to have the opportunity to be part of NPU and the board. You know, many of you know me and my family have been part of Norwich since actually 1904, when my grandfather came and started a business. And the Beckers have been in Norwich a long time. We've been activists politically and community-wise. I was very happy when I had the opportunity to participate in the Norwich Public Utilities. Although when I started, it was somewhat of a stressful time with the builder leadership and what was going on, and I got caught up in that in the second month of my tenure. But thanks to the association of all of you, we put together a board of commissioners that looked out for Norwich Public Utilities. We made decisions that were pragmatic and good for business and good for the business of Norwich Public Utilities. I'm very proud of that. You know, many of you know that, that we are politically active, but we set all of our politics aside, the five of us, and we made consistent, good decisions that we felt that were good for Norwich Public Utilities and its employees. I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to have that opportunity. Although I am enjoying the fruits of sunny Florida, I've said to each one of you, and I've called each one of you and discussed my availability and any subject that you want that I can be of assistance. I particularly was focused when I started on the sewage treatment plant That was something I was very interested in my contractor days. I did some significant projects and I felt that I had some expertise that I might be able to offer. Although that didn't turn out in my tenure this time, it is what it is. The other focal point that many of you know that I was significantly interested in trying to bring this BPN forward. I'm proud of where we are. I'm proud of where we're going. Hopefully, we can bring it to fruition in some period of time and offer Norwich Business Park North, which will be a source of revenue, customers for NPU and whatever. So feel free to call on me, although it doesn't say commissioner in front of my name. I'll always be part of Norwich. I'll always be part of the NPU board in my mind. And thank you again for allowing me to serve.
Well, Steve, we have provided or created a plaque in your honor that we'll be mailing at the completion of this meeting. And it states, Commissioner Steve Becker, in grateful recognition of your service as a Norwich Public Utilities Commissioner, January 2016 to April 2021. Your leadership and commitment to NPU and our customers has made an important contribution to our organization. And we are very grateful for the hours you put in on this board and helping our customers and the citizens of Norwich. And you're well appreciated with staff, and thank you very much, Steve.
Hey, John, until they pushing up buttons, I finally got it.
Thank you, Chris, very much.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of the staff.
Appreciate it.
Keep going. Like I said, if anything that I can do to help, feel free to call on me. I'll be back. There'll be a time when I'll be around. Thank you again.
Hey, Steve.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes.
Yeah. Great job, Steve. Thank you. Steve, Bill,
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Steve.
Thank you, all you guys. Good luck, good health, and success to all of us in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for giving me the time to speak. Thank you again.
No, it was our pleasure. You've been great. Thank you, Steve. The next item on the agenda is information and updates provided to the board prior to tonight's meeting. And there are three of them: a leadership team template, a retirement update, and a COVID-19 financials report. Chris?
Any questions from the board? And we can have staff answer if needed.
I have just a couple questions. Maybe Larry would be the best person. So in terms of the permit from D for the landfill, is that strictly for sewage sludge?
No, that's for capping the landfill and the construction debris. Larry, you want to go into detail?
And no, it's nothing to do with sewage sludge whatsoever. It is actually classified as a landfill now, and part of it is they want it permanently capped per their standards. So all the fill that gets moved around during this project will be stored up there to a certain elevation, then capped with grass.
So they'll open the cap and dispose of whatever needs to be disposed of.
It's actually not capped now. That's one of the problems with DEEP. So that they demanded it did be capped as part of the project.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. So I'm thinking. I'm sorry. I apologize. So I was thinking Rogers Road landfill because there was
Rogers Road is capped. Yes.
capped. So this is the landfill on
Hollyhock Island.
Okay. Good. All right. And then the second question, any update on the COVID testing of the sewage? Is that still ongoing?
Yeah, so we look at that every Friday with staff, and it's showing a very good trend right now. And we're seeing the numbers coming down in Norwich, and that tends to lead, not lag, the hospitalizations and positive tests. So in general, we're coming down, and the sewer testing is showing that it's going to continue to go down.
Good. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, this is Stu Peel. On wastewater again. On the wastewater treatment plant, it says that there was comments from DEEP that CDM Smith had addressed and sent back to DEEP on April 7th. Were those comments extensive, and do you think that CDM Smith answered them Deep's satisfaction?
No, the comments weren't extensive. We thought as a group, I know with Steve and Chris, we reviewed the comments prior to being sent up. They were direct and they were to the point. And I do know that now that the two regulators, I think George Hicks and Stella, are meeting again. George wants to meet and review the comments with the regulator who is truly taking a hard look at this thing. So we think we answered the comments very well.
Okay, all right, thanks, Larry. Also, under cybersecurity, I don't want to get into a big discussion about this, but is this something that we have to talk about at a later meeting? It said that there were several potential security issues that have been and have taken all appropriate action. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to talk about a lot of it tonight if it's going to take a long time, but is this something we want to schedule for another meeting? Or is
Okay.
it something really minor and you can talk about it now?
Stuart, can you, is this in IT or what are we talking about?
This is on page 7 of 8 under cybersecurity concerns. I'm sorry, that wouldn't be Larry, that's Steve. I'm sorry. I'm on a different page.
Or John Covey. John Covey's on. John?
Yep.
Give it up, please.
So, over the last probably month and a half, we've noticed a number of upticks in things like phishing attempts and attacks like that to try and defeat our network. As these things have arisen, we've addressed each one of those concerns. There have been a few things that we've been notified by, say, Microsoft or other manufacturers of their software. Those are the kinds of things we've been addressing.
Okay. Is this a kind of a thing where we think we're being singled out, or is this just random activity that just happens to be landing on us?
It's kind of a little bit of both. We're on a number of different email groups that notify us whenever there's certain heightened activity. So if there's a vulnerability that's discovered, whether or not it's been exploited, we patch it. If there's a known attack that uses a certain type of software, we make sure on our system that it's secured. So things like that, it's kind of runs the gamut. There haven't been any kind of like active singling us out, trying to knock down the walls attacks in the last 30 days. But over time, those are the kinds of things we keep our eye on. Unfortunately, it becomes kind of part and parcel of what we do every day.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, John.
No worries.
All right.
All right, great. Do we have any other questions on those 3 items? Hearing none, we will move on to Clifford Larson Allen LLP Auditor's Report.
Right. So Lauren here is going to provide us an overview of the audit process, and then she'll be introducing the auditors to give their report.
All right.
The report was provided to everyone today on their desk here. It came in late. Laura, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so the NPU fiscal year 20 audit started last year in May of 2020 with a preliminary virtual meeting to discuss the engagement. Due to the pandemic, the fiscal 20 audit was moved to 100% virtual with all documentation shared electronically between NPU Clifton Larson, formerly Bloom Shapiro, and the audit was finalized in March of 2021. Included in the electronically distributed materials was the NPU fiscal 20 audited financial statements. And in the hard copy materials that you have tonight is the audit communication letter that went to the city when the audit was issued. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Ron Nossick. He is our partner at Clifton Larson. Ron specializes in the audit of government entities and is the principal on the NPU audit team. He's here tonight to give us an overview of the fiscal year 2020 audited financials. Ron?
Laura, thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. We're going to just, I'll take you through this PowerPoint presentation. It shouldn't take more than maybe 15 minutes, but if you have any questions while I'm moving through it, please feel free to stop and ask the question. If there are issues or questions that I can't answer tonight simply because I don't have the information with me right now, or at least not accessible very quickly, I will certainly circle back to you either through Laura or attend a future meeting in order to address any open comments or open questions that still remain. So I'm not sure who's running the slide deck, but if you want to jump ahead, should to the table of contents. So what I'll go through real quick. Terms of the engagement. So basically what it is you hired us to do, the reporting results, which are the results of what we did. Just quick financial highlights relative to the NPU financial statements. And then I list out the required communications, which, as Laura just indicated, you have a copy of what's called the SAS 114 letter that went to the city council upon issuance of the financial statements. And the only thing I'll deal relative to those, I'm not going to go through them one by one, just an understanding of what they're all about. So if we want to jump to the next slide here, primarily, what we're hired to do is to express an opinion on whether the basic financial statements are presented in accordance with principles. Under Yellow Book auditing, which is all governmental auditing, we fall under governmental auditing standards as well. And under governmental auditing standards relative to those financial statements, we are also required to gain an understanding of the internal control systems surrounding financial reporting and an understanding of any compliance requirements relative to the entity we're auditing, that a compliance violation would be deemed material to the financial statements. So we do issue a report relative to government auditing standards on any findings related to internal control or compliance violations that were detected during the performance of our engagement. We'll jump to the next slide. Additional terms that we're performing these engagements under are also under uniform guidance, which is formerly the Federal Single Audit Act. And what we're doing there is very similar to governmental auditing standards relative to any internal control matters that reach a level of significant deficiency or material weakness that we would be required to report to you. And then also report to you any violations relative to compliance related to the major federal programs that are tested. So the difference between uniform guidance and governmental auditing standards is simply that the focus is very, very narrow under uniform guidance. It's only looking at internal controls and compliance relative to the major programs that were selected and tested, required to be tested, that the city managed, either at the city, at the school department, or at NPU. And finally, we kind of do the same thing. If you want to jump the slide here, we do the same thing as we do in uniform guidance under the Connecticut State Single Audit Act. Connecticut is one of a small handful of states that actually have their own single audit act that stands alone relative to state grants that are issued through the state. So again, we're expressing an opinion on the compliance relative to the major state programs and reporting to the control matters that reach the level of significant deficiency or material weakness. Again, focus solely on the major programs, in this case, major state programs. So the next slide, we'll start to talk about the results, which is embedded in the reports that we issue relative to NPU and NPU's standalone financial statement, as well as the federal single audit and state single audit reports. So under the, relative to the financial statements, which is our primary audit opinion on the NPU standalone financials, it is presented on pages 1 through 3 of those financials. We've issued an unmodified or clean audit opinion on the financial statements as of June 30, 2020, which basically is stating that in our opinion, based on based on the performance of our procedures, it's our opinion that the financial position and results of operations are fairly presented in the financial statements themselves. Relative to the governmental accounting standards report, and that's a standalone report that is in both the federal and state single audit acts, there were no internal control or compliance matters that were reported or that came to our attention relative to, during the performance of our procedures relative to financial systems and compliance requirements that relate to the financial statements themselves. And then if we want to jump to slide, this is the reporting under uniform guidance, again, formerly Federal Single Audit Act. And we issued an unmodified opinion, again, a clean opinion on the major federal programs that we tested. So this relates to compliance. The drinking water state revolving fund cluster is actually federal money, although it is managed by the state of Connecticut through the revolving fund. That is the only grant, both at federal and state sides, that we captured that relates to so I did highlight that there. NPU was the participant, if you will, in the scope of this. And then relative to internal control and compliance, there were no internal control matters that were required to be reported under any of the federal programs tested. So that being child nutrition cluster, the drinking water revolving fund, lead hazard reduction grant program, no internal control matters, and there were no compliance violations relative to those programs that were detected as while we performed our procedures. So same results. If we want to jump the slide, this will be the last one relative to reporting results. It relates to just the Connecticut State Single Audit Act, and I've just highlighted it here that NPU did not have any subject to the Audit Act, the state single audit in fiscal 20. But from the perspective of citywide, the Connecticut State Single Audit Act, we also issued an unmodified opinion on compliance, and there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses relative to internal control. So all in all, clean reporting for NPU as standalone and the city as a whole relative to financial statements, federal single audit, and state single audit. So that will wrap the reporting results. We can the slide here and just go through some financial highlights. So from a department-wide perspective, so NPU in total, NPU activities, that position, if you're more familiar with commercial accounting, basically we're talking about the retained earnings portion of the balance sheet. The net position of NPU was $130,143,305 as of June 30, 2020. That represented an increase of 8.8 million. I'll round here for the sake of time savings. So it represented an increase of about 8 million year over year. And your operating income, so basically operating revenues less operating expenses. Again, NPU activity wide, if you will, so all of your divisions for the year was $14.8 million, and that was led primarily by the gas and electric divisions. And I have a snapshot of the operating statement in here, the statement of activities. So we can, if you can remember that, or write those numbers down if you cared to. But hopefully you'll have copies of the slide deck after that you can refer back to. But we'll see that on the financial statements. I think I have that highlighted. From a cash flow perspective, so the financial statements are made up of the statement of net position, or the balance sheet, if you will, the statement of activities or the income statement, and there's a cash flow statement. So from the perspective of the cash flow statement, there was a net increase in cash and cash equivalents year over year of approximately $11.4 million. And that was primarily generated out of your operating activities. As I spoke earlier, your total operating income was $14.8 million. I think we all understand we're under GAAP and not cash basis. So that operating income amount doesn't necessarily equate to cash flow. It could be tied up in receivables or some other asset that has yet to be liquidated. But in this case, it is pretty close. Because we did see an increase in cash and cash equivalents of about $11.3 million. The slide, the last two big items that sit on the statement of a net position, so the balance sheet, are capital assets. I spoke earlier of your net position of about 130 million. I think 120 million plus of that is tied up in capital assets. It's not, total liquid position, if you will. So capital assets for the year increased about $5.5 million year over year. The total balance in fixed assets or capital assets at the end of the fiscal year was up to $154 million. And the activity or the increase year over year was primarily led by construction in progress projects that are ongoing and still remain as of June 30 year end. So they haven't been transferred out into any asset category, haven't been placed in service as of yet. And construction in progress for the year was about $14 million. What knocks down the overall increase is about $5.5 million is the fact that you are providing depreciation against assets that are in service, which depreciation expense for the year was a little over $8 million. So the two of those net gets you to about 5.5. There was some other ebb and flow, but relatively speaking, those were the most items. And then finally, long-term debt. Your long-term debt increased almost $17 million a year and ended at a total liability of $99.3 million. And this was primarily the increase was primarily led by an increase in net position. I mean, in net pension liability, excuse me. I do have a snapshot of that as well, so we can look at that in just a second. So if we can jump slides, we'll get into the snapshots, if you will. I can see all of this. I know when we have a financial statement and drop it into a PowerPoint, sometimes you need the Hubble telescope to see the numbers. So I'm hoping everybody can see them. But this is the statement of activities or the income statement as of June 30 for the end of the fiscal year, June 30, 2020, by division. And I've highlighted obviously the operating income, which is about mid-page. You can see that as you look across the page, where it landed relative to a division. And as I stated earlier, all the way over to the right is the $14.8 million overall operating income for the fiscal year. And as I said, there was primarily led by gas and electric, and you can see those values. We had about a little over $5 million operating income in gas and it's almost $8 million in electric. And then down below, the total change in net position, so basically net income, if you will, for the fiscal year. Again, all the way over to the right is the referred to earlier, 8.827464. So that was entity-wide or all the divisions combined. But you can see them as you go across the page relative to each individual division. And finally, that last line is your net position at year end. Again, go over to the right, and you can see the $130 million that we were talking about earlier relative to net position at June 30. We can jump ahead here. And we're going to just take a look at the cash flow statement. This perhaps is a little more difficult to see, but I do have just the overall increase in cash and cash equivalents over the fiscal year. Again, all the way to the right is the $11.3 million that we just talked about a few minutes ago. Again, you can see it by division as to what was generating, what division generated how much cash relative to the overall NPU activities. And then if you look up, I didn't highlight it and I apologize, but if you look up to the first section, so that is the net cash flows provided by operating activities. The first subtotal under gas is $7.361062 million. So that's what I was talking about relative to where the big generation of this cash flow or cash and cash equivalents during the fiscal year. Because if you look at your other sections, non-capital and related financing and capital and related financing, you see that all those basically depleted cash position. So it was clearly operations that generated cash flow for you for the fiscal year. You can jump the next slide. I believe is going to be just a snapshot of the capital asset activity for the fiscal year. So you see the beginning balance there. And then the transfers column, and basically what that is during the fiscal year, certain projects get closed out and the assets get placed in service, they get transferred out of that construction in progress line down into the capital asset buckets, if you will, be it or whatever distribution system. So those transfers typically, unless something went totally awry relative to the construction itself, are going to just net out to zero, which they do here. The next column, the increases you can see in the construction in progress, the 14.2 million that I was talking about a little bit earlier, and then if you drop down into the last section, if you will, where this section is less accumulated depreciation for particular asset categories, you'll see a little over 8 million, 8,066,596, which was depreciation expense for the fiscal year. So bottom line of that table, all the way across to the right, you'll see that tie back to the commentary earlier in the slides of total asset value was of 153,974,757 as of June 30, 2020, and again. It represented about a $5.5 million increase year over year. And then the last slide we can look at is going to be the long-term debt slide. And, focus here is on that net pension liability because while it overall increase was about $16 million, almost $5.2 million of that were notes that were taken out through the state of Connecticut. You can see that up towards the top of the schedule here. So those are planned increases in debt that the authority was clearly fully aware of. You were signing the documents and entering into the note agreements with the state of Connecticut. So those shouldn't catch anyone by surprise. It's really the pension and OPEB liabilities that information from the actuaries, you don't really know where you stand relative to that liability, and it is just that actuarial liability. So while I believe wholeheartedly in actuarial science, it is an estimate. It is not a definitive number, if you will, relative to that. That is exactly where it stood as of this date and time, be that June 30th. The reason being is because there are a lot of estimates that go into determining numbers, and one of the drivers that increased your pension liability this year by almost $11 million, right? 10,865,000, I believe that is that the discount rate that was being used historically in the plan was decreased. I think appropriately decreased because it was elevated a little high. It was a little unreasonable relative to what market performance actually is. So that the mere fact that took place is going to drive that liability up higher. And then we got a little bit of a double whammy here relative to what COVID did to the market. The market was climbing back by June 30th, but hadn't really fully recovered. I don't know where that pension liability stands as of right now, but some of the asset values that decrease the overall pension liability have recovered since then. So, apples to apples. It did get better shortly thereafter the end of the fiscal year, but that's where it stood as of June 30, 2020. So,
can I ask a question, if you have it with you? What was the discount rate and what did it change to?
It was 7.5 and went down to 7.25.
Okay.
So that was all the financial highlights I was going to do. They are like 40,000 feet, the big picture items. What's left here in the slide deck, again, I'm not going to go through a couple of slides, but I'm not going to go through these individually. All I want to kind of let you know, give you, you know, some background to this is all of these topical areas. So where you see highlighted, so qualitative aspects of accounting practices, difficulties in accounting performance and performing the audit, so on. We're not making those up. Those aren't areas that we feel like communicating to you. Those are required communications that the AICPA has dictated that we, as your auditors, need to communicate to those charged with governance. And the reason being is that in all of these instances, although they may seem rather eclectic in nature, in that they're sort of put in all different directions relative to their topics, what they would present if there were things that were occurring in these areas is the idea or the concept that management may be showing some bias relative to the financial statements, meaning they may be trying to make financial statements look perhaps better than they actually are, or perhaps worse than they actually are. I don't know that there's many circumstances where someone would be wanting to present a gloomier picture than what reality is. But nonetheless, bias can work in both directions. So, just some examples. The example here on slide 1, relative to qualitative aspects, those are all estimates. And so, if when we evaluating the estimates that are being used, the allowance for uncollectible receivables, things of that nature, and find them to be unreasonable, perhaps too, like in the case of an allowance for uncollectible, that it's too small, then in theory, management may be trying to make the receivables and therefore the net position look better than it perhaps actually is. Corrected misstatements. Again, just an example, if we had 15 audit adjustments presented to management and management decided to only post 7 of them because all 7 of those increased net position, made things look better, and the other 8 made things look worse, and they did not want to post those, clearly that would be an indication of bias, and that would be reported to you. If you want to jump the slide, you can just see the remaining areas that are required to disclose, to be disclosed or communicated to you. And you, again, with the bias theory in mind, hopefully I hope you can see what it is these are all about. But in all instances, there was nothing that we encountered relative to the performance of our procedures that gave us any indication that management was to present anything other than what was with full financial position and results of operations for the fiscal year. And the last slide in there is simply contact information for myself, Matt Coit, who was the engagement manager. His title is now director of the CLA. He was manager under Boom Shapiro. So if you have any questions, it's best if you channel them through Laura, but if you feel compelled to reach out to us directly, you're more than happy to do that. That will end my my part of the meeting, unless I have any other questions from you. I thank you for your time and turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
No, just because I'm fairly new with this, what is the relationship between NPU and the city in terms of the pension? I mean,
NPU is part of the city pension, so
you contribute based on the pensions that NPU workers get?
yeah. So Personnel and Pension Board sets the requirements. We follow those. Laura can go into the details of how that is done every year. Laura, can you inform Bill on how that's done?
Sure. So as part of our annual process for evaluation, we have a actuarial report that's done in regards to both OPEB and the pension. And that information is split up between the city and NPU. And there is a process where there's the ADEC, the actuarial determined employer contribution. And that is the dollar amount that we have to contribute to the plan every year. And what happens is that plan is analyzed and reviewed based on the performance of the plan as a whole, but also they've split out NPU as a separate entity so that we can see the amount of funding NPU is doing and the amount of liabilities that are specific to NPU. So it is one plan, but our portion is segregated so we can see our activity and then also report in our financials the liabilities specific to NPU.
Thank you, Lauren.
That answer your question?
Yeah. Are there any red flags that we need to be aware of that are going on with the plan at all, or, I mean, in light of what was said tonight?
The only concern that I would say is that we should, on a regular basis, review what the total funding and the liability. There is general guidance as to the level of funding that we should have and whether or not NPU would want to contribute more than the ADEC in order to increase that funding percentage. And that's something that we should probably review sometime in the future with the Finance and Audit Committee.
Okay. The plan is not fully funded.
No.
Yes, I don't know where it stands today, but basically the city and NPU has to kick in money for people who are retired, as well as the pension plan kicking in money for people who are retired. If it was fully funded, the pension plan would pay 100% of that. The other thing that he said that was interesting, I guess, is the discount rate has been dropped, from 7.5 to 7.25. That's probably a fair number. And that's basically a rate that they use to look at the projections.
Thank God I'm not on this commission.
Just a quick question, Chris, you could probably answer this. Does DPH also audit us under the loan?
So we have numerous audits that come from the state. DOT occasionally audit us on a project. Department of Health will occasionally audit us on a project, deep audit on this project. But it's not a guarantee, but that happens every once in a while. Okay. And just to make sure that everything is according to the covenants that we put in place. Thank you.
I have a quick question. Is Christine Larson still at the firm?
I'm sorry?
Is Christine Larson still at the firm? I think actually her married name is Demina or something like that.
Yes, Christine Demena. Yes, she is.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a quick question too, Ron. My name is Mike Goldblatt. I'm also a CPA. I don't do audits, so I'll defer to your expertise every time, but just a quick question. I was of the impression that we used to get a comparative financial statement with 2 years. Am I wrong on that? And now we've got a one presentation here.
I'd have to look, to be honest with you. I don't recall. I've been the partner on this engagement for, I think, 4 years now. And I honestly don't recall comparatives, but I could be wrong. I can look back and see if that is the case.
You weren't around when Udi Shapiro was in Bloom Shapiro by any chance, were you?
No, I know I look old, but no, I came out of a national firm in 2016 and joined Bloom Shapiro then. So I wasn't at Bloom. I was there for 5 years, and then we did the CLA transaction effective January 1 of this year.
Udi was a family friend way back, and when I passed a CPA exam in 1976, that proved my experience, and I worked with my dad in the meantime, so a year before I took the exam, and Udi vouched for my experience, which was very nice of him. He didn't have to do that. Helped me get my certification. So he was a good man. That's all I got.
Okay.
All right, well, do we have any other questions, or should we move on to another subject? Hearing no more questions, thank you very much for the report. It was obviously a good report, so we're pleased. And we will move on. The next item on the agenda is the CMAC update. Stuart, do you have an update on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Since our last meeting, CMAC met twice on March 25th and April 22nd. At the March meeting, the Compensation Committee presented a recommendation to increase the CEO's salary by 5% and add a 10% incentive bonus. This compensation increase is based on David Meisinger's satisfactory performance in accordance with his employment agreement. Going forward, the Compensation Committee will determine salary raises from an incentive program vetted by the committee. The Risk Management Committee elevated its newest member, Robert Staley, to the committee chair. So congratulations, Robert.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I always like those I don't know anything about.
Yeah, well, it was a good thing that the onboarding materials, gave you kind of a head start there. So.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. The Audit Committee recommended to the board acceptance of the draft 2020 audit financial statement, which was approved unanimously. Gabe Stern of CMEC presented a contract renewal authorization proposal for the New York Power Authority, also known as NYPA, Niagara Project. Niagara Project produces 2,675 megawatts of power, of which 10% must be offered to preferred customers in neighboring states, including Connecticut. Connecticut assigned CMEC in 1977 to be the designated bargaining agent for the 10 megawatts assigned to Connecticut as part of the agreement. The authorization allows the CEO to extend CMEC participation in this project to 2032. The board unanimously approved the resolution to approve the agreement and authorize the CEO to execute the agreement extension. At the April meeting, CMEC was presented an offer by NYPA to accept an additional 7.6 megawatts of Niagara firm peaking power. This additional power would be made part of the agreement approved in March to extend to 2032, if agreed to by CMEC. Gabe Stern presented the pro forma for the additional power and explained that the project does come with risk in that ISO New England may not grant the power capacity status based on a 90-day unilateral withdrawal clause that can be exercised by each party. If ISO New England grants capacity status for the power, capacity fees could not be collected for at least 3 years, where the project would have negative value, but would likely break even by 2032. If ISO New England does not grant capacity status, the project has negative value. The board agreed to allow the CEO to move forward on a non-commit basis for 90 days to better determine the project's value to CMEC. Although the best case scenario would be a break-even project, the Niagara hydropower is considered green energy, which helps CMEC meet its so far voluntary obligation to CMEC to move towards green energy. And lastly, the Budget and Finance Committee reported out that 2 lines of credit totaling $50 million held by CMEC were recommended to be consolidated into 1 line of credit with a reduced value from $50 million to $40 million, with a resultant standby cost savings to CMEC of $144,000 annually. And the board approved the recommendation unanimously. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Stuart. Do we have any questions? Hearing none, the next item on the agenda is the RT3 award.
Chris? So, Reliable Public Power is an award by the American Public Power Association. And Eric McDermott is going to give us an update on how we made out this year. But it is not just a reflection of the electric division only. And Eric does this with APPA. Barry geez, why am I? Mary Ellison also does this for natural gas and sewer. But the systems and the things that Eric reports on RP3 also work for water and sewer as well. You know, when we talk about safety, we talk about system development and system reliability. Or utilities are using the same systems, and Eric is going to specifically talk about how we are recognized for our electric performance. Eric?
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As Chris said, recently the American Public Power Association recertified NPU as a diamond level reliable public power provider through their RP3 program. Usually I would be presenting a plaque, but unfortunately APPA has had to delay those due to COVID-19. So tonight, fortunately for all of you, all you get is my smiling face and a brief explanation of the program. In order to receive the RP3 designation, utilities have to complete a rigorous application over the course of several months. As Chris said, for NPU, the completion of this application, it takes the hard work of many people in the organization, impacting every department across the utility. Applications to APPA are then reviewed by an 18-member panel of national utility experts. These experts review each application closely to identify public power utilities that exhibit operational excellence and demonstrate leading practices in 4 key areas. The first area is reliability. For this, the panel looks for evidence that a utility is going beyond just keeping the lights on. They do this by reviewing storm response plans, mutual aid agreements, data analysis programs, and cyber and physical security, just to name a few. The next thing we look at is safety. In this case, the panel looks for a culture of safety within the utility, starting with top management down to every employee within the organization. This is confirmed by an adherence to safety policies and standards that are included in all aspects of our operations. Next, they look at workforce development. Here, the panel looks for how a utility builds and maintains its workforce. They look for best practices in recruitment, succession planning, and individual development plans for employees that incorporate professional development and networking opportunities. Lastly, they look for system improvement, where the panel looks for evidence that utilities are maintaining the integrity of their systems through long-term planning. This includes system betterment programs that incorporate research and development. Across these 4 areas, NPU scored a 99 out of a possible 100 points. There are only 265 utilities out of the more than 2,000 public power utilities that are awarded this RP3 designation. More significantly, the diamond level, which we achieved, highest degree among those 265, those utilities that are continuing to provide reliable and safe electric service, recognizing NPU as truly the best of the best in public power providers. This certification dates back to 2012 for us. It's renewed every 3 years, and for each one of those 3 years, we have always been able to achieve that diamond level. With that, pending your questions, that's all I have.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. Great. Yeah, thank you. Good job. It's a great job, everybody, the staff did.
Yeah, and Eric coordinates the whole effort. And when I started doing this in 2012, Eric, and it was all paper, right? And you sent in binders, and the binders were this thick. And I can tell you, it doesn't get simpler. The requirements get more rigorous every year, and Eric and his team do a wonderful job. Now it's all electronic, but thankfully, it's much more complicated than it was when we started, and they're always looking to improve the system and everyone's systems and how they're evaluated. So thank you very much, Eric.
Well, thank you.
So how many utilities, public utilities are there, and what percentage get the diamond status?
So of the 265, there's about 100 that receive that diamond status. I'm not quick enough to do the math in my head, but that's roughly the numbers we're talking about.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good.
The next item on the agenda is customer service survey. Chris?
Chris Riley is going to give us a update on this. This was done, was it started in the fall, was it not, Chris?
No, it's actually, it came about surreptitiously. It came out of the blue. We got an end of the year flyer from a marketing company that does a lot of work with utility companies, particularly public power companies. They're based in Glastonbury. They've done a lot of work with public gas companies. And they said we have a sort of off-the-shelf survey that we could work with you on for a very, very reasonable price. I think it was like $2,500. And we could get it out online to Facebook. It wouldn't cost us any time other than just making it available and promoting it. So that's what we did. They said for it to be statistically significant, we needed to get about 300 responses. So this is just one snapshot in time. It skews older, but still, I think when you can get candid feedback or honest feedback, it's always helpful for us to see what that is going to look like. In the end, we received 366 responses. We promoted it on Facebook with a link. I'll send you guys the link to the entire survey when we're done tonight or in the morning. The responders ranged in age from 18 to 75. The majority of them were 35 to 64 years old. 113 of those are customers that have been with NPU for more than 30 years. So again, it skews older, and 65% of the respondents were female. So again, it is not the highest and best survey you could get. We did one other since I've been here that cost a lot more than $2,500. More detailed, but I thought there was some real value in this. And I'll just go through some of the higher level stuff, and then as I said, I'll send it around to everybody later on. So Steve, could you go to the first one? First and foremost, the graphics are tough on this one, but the vast majority of responders are very satisfied with NPU, 89.9% satisfaction. That's not all 40,000 people who live in Norwich, but that's the 386 folks that took the time to answer the survey. I think that's a terrific reflection.
So Chris, that combines both the very satisfied and the somewhat satisfied.
Right.
Right, okay.
The next is customer service interaction. More than 50% of the respondents had interacted with NPU customer service last year, and the overwhelming majority of those folks found that their interactions were somewhat or very favorable, 87%. Again, a terrific reflection on Ruth and her team. The next one is field services. Not as many people had interactions with field services, only about 20%, but of those, 90% were very satisfied with their interaction with NPU in their home. The reason I think that this doesn't have as much value is because obviously we had less interactions in the home over the past year, but I think there is some value. Some of this is residual, where people have come into their homes in the past, and it accrues to our benefit. We asked people about the way they prefer to get communicated to from us. 30% said email, nearly 20% said social media, internet and our website and billing service, and direct mail were also other options that people expressed an interest in. And then less than 10% were TV, radio, newspaper, or advertising. And that's, so our communications plan, I think, take into consideration all of these opportunities, all these venues. But it's good to see that some of them, the ones that we spent a lot of time on, resonate with the public. We also asked them on the next slide, Steve, the effectiveness in the ways in which we communicate with them. People are very happy with our website, their online bill capabilities, and our bill statement messages. We have the opportunity in the very near future to dramatically enhance the way in which we communicate with customers through our bills. There's a bill redesign project underway now, which you'll hear more about in the months to come. And within that, we'll have the opportunity to almost have a hybrid of the newsletters that we do, the bill messaging, far more real estate on the bill. So we're considering whether or not that's going to make sense. I think we want to wait and see how the bills themselves are received by customers before we determine whether or not we can make that change. But it would also save us a considerable amount of money throughout the course of the year. The next one was asking what area of focus was of interest to customers. Energy efficiency was the runaway winner there. Efficient electrification, time of use rates, and solar energy were all pretty significant. Interestingly, because it was an older demographic, electric vehicles barely registered. But again, I think we need to take this information and assess it against what we see in the real world. Another interesting question we added into the survey, the vast majority of people believe that NPU should continue to invest in economic development. 77% said yes, and a comparable number, 75.7%, said that service expansion into areas beyond Norwich should be pursued if it will help keep rates lower. So that's consistent with what the board has said and with the success that we've seen with some projects in the area. Safety is always the first priority, and we ask people to believe that we are focused on safety. And not a surprise that between strongly and somewhat agree, 90% of the folks that responded believe that we do focus on safety. So that's a reinforcement of, particularly during storm situations where we really emphasize the wires down and safety messages to keep not just our employees, but the and then finally, we added in a question, if you had to choose your electric provider, would you prefer to be an electric municipal or an investor-owned utility company? 85.8% said that they would prefer municipally owned power versus investor-owned. So a terrific validation again of NPU's business model and I think our track record. So not the gold standard, but not insignificant in terms of the responses that we got from customers, both in terms of the numbers and their reaction. So helpful and another interesting data point for us to consider as we put together a plan for the future.
Very good. Do we have any questions? I mean, maybe it's just my bias here, but I mean, my sense has always been that people who are unhappy are more motivated to respond to surveys than people who are happy. And with this kind of a positive result, it's really tremendous.
Yeah, and Bruce says with the customer service center, nobody comes in with a good mood.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's part of the challenge, but
they leave in a good mood.
Or a better mood. And
yeah.
And that's reflected here, so that's terrific to see.
All right, any questions?
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is executive session. Do we have a motion to go into executive session? So moved. Thank you, Michael. Do we have a second? Bill? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Stuart, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Aye.
Okay. Thank you. That's unanimous. We are now in executive session. I should read the explanation. We're going into executive with the same as every month to discuss confidential, trade secret, and commercially valuable confidential or proprietary information not subject to inspection or public disclosure pursuant to section 1-210-5 and 7-232A of the Connecticut General Statutes. This information is commercially valuable, confidential, and proprietary, and is not for public disclosure pursuant to Public Act 98-12. It's also to discuss personnel matters of an employee or employees and or public officials pursuant to Chapter 14, Section 1-206A of the Connecticut General Statute.
Should have that memorized, Bob.
Thank you very much. Need some oxygen. Okay, Claire, do you want this?
Can we get to me?
All right, let's go through these. We've discussed some of these items in executive session. The first item on the agenda is a motion to approve the one-year extension of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers with a 2.25% wage increase. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those, thank you, Stu. All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Item number 2, may I have a motion to approve the resolution to authorize Chris LaRose to finalize the agreement with ACLS as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
All right.
Well, all right. I will second.
All right, sounds good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. A motion to increase NTU support in fiscal year 2022 to $225,000 from $150,000.
I'm recused from this one.
Thank you, Michael. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I'll make that motion.
All right, second, Stu Peel.
Stu, I'll make that motion, but with the understanding that at the end of that year, who's ever selected as president of the NCDC, come in and explain the vision and goals and objectives that person has to show us the past year.
We will accept that as a friendly amendment, and let's have a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Forget that.
Vote is 3-0. Michael recuses himself. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion. I'll second it.
All those in favor? We are adjourned.
I think we might miss one. Can we unadjourn for a second?
I don't think so.
Did we approve the job description?
We did not.
We did not. I don't think I have it.
Maybe we missed that here. I apologize.
Yeah, well, let's do that. There is a proposal for a job description.
This is the utility coordination specialist job.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve that job description.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second? Michael, all those in favor?
Aye.
It is unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for all this one.
Okay.
And that electronically now. She got it. Sure, we can. But I didn't know for sure I had what you can see this one. Good? Yeah, so I'm gonna send this over that we can chat with.
Yeah. All right, and I really started out this month with a very short agenda. I don't know what happened. Next